So behind us, the Durst Taylor house on North Street is getting a new roof. So the roof is actually being replaced today, and they'll continue the work tomorrow. So the history of a site is tied to when the building was built, and then the history that occurred there. So this house was built in 1835, and then it being so close to the intersection of El Camino Real and the North Street, it's seen a lot of changes through time. And the fact that it's still here today, and there's early intervention to save the building, whereas many buildings on North Street are no longer here, that makes the site historic. So it's a combination of when the house was built. Sometimes there's historic architectural themes that want to be saved, and then there's sites that important stories are tied to the building that make them historic as well.
I mean, with the site and a home,
Yeah.
this old and this historic,
Yeah.
With it getting a new roof, how does that affect the history of the building?
Yeah. So that's kind of one of the if you take a historic structure but you've replaced every piece in it, is it still historic? We get that question a lot. So the Durst Taylor house that was built in 1835 was reinterpreted and restored around the 2000s. So the roof on it that you see here that it's being taken down is not the one that was built in 1835. So you're seeing a lot of newer roofs. Now what we try to do is use historic material. So the shingles that are being put on the roof are cedar wood. So cedar was a popular wood to be used for roofs in the 1800s. It's naturally really hardy wood, and it also naturally repels insects. So it was common. Now what's different from these shingles and the shingles they were used in the 1800s is this is treated to be a little bit more fire resistant than it would have been in the 1800s, mostly because they didn't have that technology back then. But when we do restore historic sites, we try our best to use as much of the original material as possible. So if, for example, if there's rotted wood, rather than taking out the whole chunk of wood, whether it be rotted or some that's still good, we'll try to replace just the pieces that need to be restored and maintain the pieces that are already there and could be from the original build.
How many repairs can you make to a building before it just becomes a replica?
That's kind of the constant question is, like I said, if every brick has been replaced, if every piece of wood. Luckily with our historic sites, a lot of the material is original, which is a testament to, like I said, the early intervention, people coming together to save the site early on, and also how well the building is cared for. I mean, that could be said for buildings built today. It's all about how well they were built, how well they were maintained is how long they last. But any structure needs constant repair, some small and some larger restoration like you see behind us. Actually, the roof was replaced around 10 years ago, so not that quite long ago, but there's been some pieces replaced here and there, some wood pieces, some siding. We've had to, so it has a ramp up to the house, which wouldn't have been there historically. We've done some repairs on the ramp, so it's had some repairs since it was restored.
You guys, and for you as managing these sites, what's the preparation like to get a repair like this done?
Yeah, so first off, we have staff at all of our historic sites periodically, so when I can't be there, along with giving tours, they're kind of our eyes on the ground, keeping an eye on the sites, making me aware of any repairs that need to be made. And of course, I make several rounds to look at the sites, especially after a lot of the storms that we've had lately, to monitor how they're doing, how the roofs are doing. When we determine that, for example, a roof needs to be replaced, we follow the standard purchasing methods that the rest of the city departments have to do. If the threshold is met where we need to get quotes, we'll get multiple quotes. But what we do as historic sites that might be a little bit different is we make sure that any contractors we're talking to have experience working on historic buildings, because sometimes working on a historic building is a little bit different than working on a modern building, or working with cedar wood is a little bit different than working with the material you'll see on most modern buildings. So we just like to maintain communication with those who are working on our sites. Sometimes we'll ask them to send pictures of previous work that they've done. So that's kind of the precautions that we take in the very beginning. Now, when the project gets started, we'll determine if the whole site is becoming a construction zone like this project, site. And at that point, we're going to close the site to the public to make sure our visitors stay safe and our staff stay safe. So like today, while this work is going on, the site is closed. It'll be closed tomorrow during the rest of the construction process. Yeah. The history of the building is maintained. It was reinterpreted to the 1840s, 1860s look. So a lot of the modern things that happened to the building, and say the building was occupied till the 1960s, roughly. And so there were some modern things added. There's electricity added. So when we reinterpret a site to a later date, some of that is pulled out. So the electrical was pulled out. It doesn't have any electricity in the house, or it has no lighting in the house, no plumbing. So the history is still there. We have artifacts inside that we cover and protect during the construction process. And of course, part of the great thing about our sites is we have tour guides that help keep the stories alive. And I've said before that it's not just about the buildings themselves, it's about the story and the history tied to the site.